It is Parenting Tuesday. My name is James Okumu. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We want to look at adoption and foster care in Kenya. And I have two gentlemen joining me in studio via Zoom. We have got Peter Kamau, who's the Executive Director at Child in Family Focus. How are you doing, sir?
Great, thank you, James. Thanks for having me.
Karibu sana, we are glad to have you. We also have Boniface Buluma. Boniface is from Child Protection at Tree of Life. Boniface, how are you?
I'm fine. Good morning.
Good morning. Karibuni sana. It's good to have both of you on the show today as we talk about adoption and foster care in the country. Let's first of all begin by defining adoption. We hear this term a lot, you know, adoption. Even in the Christian circles, we talked about being adopted into the family of God. But what really is adoption? Maybe I can begin with you, Peter.
Thank you, James. Adoption is defined as the complete cutting off of the ties between a biological parent and an adoptive parent, and considering that it is a legal process, this is something that is granted by the court. So it is the complete cutoff of relationship between a child and his or her biological parents, and the establishment of a new relationship between that child and the new parents, called the adoptive parents.
Okay. Anything you want to add to that, Boniface?
I think he has put it so well, because it has a permanent nature to it.
Okay. You know, the process of adoption, in fact, I was reading something about this yesterday. There's a perception that the process of adoption, especially in the country, is not user-friendly. It is so hard to adopt a child. So is that just a myth? Is it true? What is the process of adopting a child, Boniface?
When you're talking about adopting a child, I will tell you that, yes, PK can give us more guidance. However, we have adoption agencies that are involved. At the national level, we have a committee that eventually makes all these decisions. But I think Peter can be able to take us through step by step on how eventually we have the adoptive parents coming on board, how the court is involved in the process for us to eventually have a child placed within an adoption kind of a framework.
James, normally it's a myth, I must say, that needs debunking.
Yes.
Because when it is proliferated to such an extent, then it means many children end up staying in children's homes for long durations of time. But what happens is, for anyone that is keen on adopting, they have to visit an adoption agency or an adoption society. It means the same thing. And the adoption agency will normally conduct an assessment or vet the applicants to find out that they are suitable for this process.
Okay.
Other than the bit about vetting the family, and it entails sort of getting to know a bit about the family, getting to know their family composition, what they do for a living, why they want to adopt. The motive is very, very important to understand, so that you're sure that this is an arrangement that is not going to work in the interest of the family, but that it is going to be in the child's best interest. And so other than vetting the applicants, we also have the adoption agency doing a process that is called the freeing of a child for adoption. Normally, children that mostly are abandoned in hospital, or the police normally take these children to children's homes, are the number one qualifiers for adoption.
Okay.
And so ensuring that this child is indeed free for that process and no one will be coming to claim this child later on is a process that is very diligently conducted by the children's home as well as the adoption agency. But then to simplify the process, I must say, just like a pregnancy that takes 9 months, adoption for a couple that is very committed from the start to finish, it is possible to walk into an adoption agency today, and at the close of 8 months, you'd have your child not only at home with you, but that the child will even have been sort of taken through the adoption process with the court, meaning that you'd have the court orders. So it is very possible. It all depends on the determination of the couple that is in the process. But also, we must also add that it's a court process as emphasized, and that the adoption agency has to be involved. A child has to be free from this process to ensure that the couple also feel the security that a child will not be taken away from them.
Okay. You know, you talked of a couple. I'm just wondering, are singles, does the law allow singles to adopt?
Thank you. Very good question. Yes, the law does allow singles to adopt. Single ladies, single men have, of course, permission to adopt by the law. The only little challenge is that a single lady can only adopt a girl child, and a single man can only adopt a boy child. But there are special circumstances. We have special circumstances that would lead a single lady to having a boy and vice versa for the gentleman. But of course, it's very rare to find men coming forth to adopt children. We have around 3 that I know of in this country. But also there's a lot of emphasis that the family surrounding that man has to be present for the child. The grandmothers, the aunties, you know, the sisters, they have to be really in the picture to ensure that this child does not grow up without any female mother figures or aunties and the like. And likewise, for example, if a lady already has a son or a boy child, then that qualifies her for adoption of another boy child. But yes, there are special circumstances.
Okay. Now, Boniface, I'm just thinking about our African setting, our African way of life and culture, you know, and the child belongs to the community. That's how it's been. And so sometimes I find there's the issue where a child is orphaned or a child is, you know, alitupwa kwa choo. You know those cases we hear. And out of a good heart, you want to take them in. Forget about these processes. Mtoto ndio huyu hapa, anahitaji mahali pa kukaa. I am willing, I can feed them, I can educate them. I can make them my own. Is that a bad thing? Is there a danger in doing that and not going through all these legal processes because sometimes people think they can be a headache?
It's true. We have these situations within the society, and yes, it's good to have the willing heart. However, even if you go ahead and act without following the processes, it might also expose you as an individual to problems, not only yourself as a person who's trying to help, but also it can also expose the child to problems. Because also in the country we have cases of child trafficking. Let's not forget that whereas we have cases of children who are abandoned, we have cases of children who are in vulnerable situations. At the same time, we also have people who are operating in the country with a negative or with ill motives, leading to child trafficking for other ends. Therefore, the procedures, the laws that are in the country protecting the welfare of children are aimed at ensuring that, yes, the well-being of the child is well protected, but at the same time, it does not discourage individuals who want to come forth to be able to be available to help children in the country. Therefore, it is good to have the willing heart, but it's very, very important that we follow due procedure according to the law, supported by the Kenyan government. Okay.
Peter, I'm just wondering, what are some things that would disqualify somebody from adopting?
Thank you, James. The law is very clear. It actually stipulates who qualifies and who does not. For example, if you are under 25 years of age and over 65 years, that already is a disqualifier because the cutoff is 25 years to 65. Other than that, if you have a criminal record, that definitely puts a child in harm's way, and it means owing to that background, there is assurance that the child will not be safe with you owing to a criminal history, then that also puts you out of the list. Number 3, if you are a homosexual, in this country, we do not allow homosexuals to adopt children. Other than that, if, for instance, you are suffering from an ailment that means that your life is likely to be cut short very soon, and the prognosis is wrong. There are those particular requirements that are very clear as per the law, and that's why we have the adoption agency running sort of a vetting together with the government children's department to be sure that a child actually will be safe in this particular place.
Okay. Can somebody's financial status disqualify them from adopting?
Thank you. Good question. We always say it's all about the heart. And I know I worked in an adoption agency for 9 years.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, we placed a child with a mama mboga from Kibra. And it is because it's not so much about what is coming in and going, but it's that she has a heart and will do the best she can to ensure that this child is catered for, goes to a school, and most importantly, that there is parental love and care. And so financial status does not disqualify, but also it is important that we consider that a child has to be catered for on a day-to-day basis, and that there is not going to be a situation where the child will be starving because there's no money, but that there's some consistent, means of income coming in and going out and the likes.
Okay. I'm just wondering, Boniface, is there a difference when we talk about foster care and adoption? Kind of looks like the same thing. Is there a difference?
Yes, it can appear they have a lot of commonalities. However, these are two different options of care. Adoption is what Peter has elaborated so well.
Yeah.
Whereas when we talk about foster care, here we are talking of placing a child with a person who is neither a relative to this child, this person is not a parent to the child, and this person is not a guardian to the child. That is one. Two, there is a clear distinction between foster care and adoption, whereby one has a permanent nature, another one is temporary in nature. When you're talking about foster care being temporary, is because currently, according to the Kenyan laws, you can only have a child under foster care for a maximum of 3 years. It implies that when a child is placed with a foster family, the first certificate that is issued is for 12 months. Within these 12 months, a lot of monitoring is done to try to understand how the family situation, the biological family situation of the child can be improved for this child to be placed back to the family of origin. When this is not possible, then the certificate is renewed so that the child can stay with the foster family for 2 years. The law allows that you can renew this certificate twice. So it means it eventually leads to a child staying with a foster family for a period of 3 years, because it is believed that within these 3 years, if there was a problematic situation within the family of origin of the child, then it is possible to resolve, to trace the family, to resolve what were the problematic situations and render that family environment conducive for the child, so that eventually the child can be reunified and reintegrated in the family of origin.
Peter, do we have foster care in Kenya? Mimi naonaga tu foster care kwa movies. Kwa ground vitu ziko the same ama ni different?
Oh, my brother. Kwa ground vitu ni tofauti. Kuna foster care ina happen.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a foster care. We have, for example, Tree of Life has over the last 3 years been running a pilot foster care program where they are actually working with the government children's office to facilitate the placement of children in families under a foster care arrangement. Next week, actually this coming Sunday on the 12th, I'll be at a church talking about foster care and encouraging congregants to step forward to actually come forth and foster children. So it actually is happening. It's also good to mention, Bwana Okumu, that the rule of thumb according to UNICEF is that for every 3 months, a child who is aged 3 years and under is in a children's home, this child loses a month of development. And it goes to reiterate why it is so important that children actually are cared for in family settings.
Okay. That is, I've never had that statistic. That is quite something. Aya, ni saa ngapi? It's 7:28.
And I believe
say that again.
It's important that it's mind-boggling, this kind of a statistic.
Yeah.
And I believe as Christians, opening our families up for children to have this possibility would be very, very important.
Very, very true. I agree with you. It's 28 after 7. It is Parenting Tuesday, adoption and foster care in Kenya. Kama uko na maswali, my friend, don't wait until 5 minutes before we end the show and then you ask me 56 questions. I won't be able to answer all of them. So send them in now. Kama uko na swali ya adoption, kama uko na swali ya foster care, if this is an area you've been wanting to find out information about, 2 gentlemen in studio ready to give you the answers to the questions you have. 316. Boniface, tell us a bit about Tree of Life and what you guys do And even as you talk to us about that, you can also talk a bit about what alternative care is.
Okay. So at Tree of Life, what you're doing is that we are an organization that is keen on protecting the rights of children and promoting the well-being of children within the family and within the community. We have programs that are targeting issues of health. We have programs targeting issues of education, because we consider these are two areas that families mostly struggled with, and therefore we try to somehow give a helping hand. In the last 3 years, we've been doing a project, a pilot project in terms of foster care in the counties of Nairobi as well as Nakuru. In Nairobi, we've been collaborating with an organization called the Collective Community Action, especially in Kasarani and in Embakasi, whereby not only did we seek to strengthen the government system, whereby we have area advisory councils as well as alternative care committees that were trained on alternative care as well as trained on foster care for purposes of creating awareness in their area, but also to be able to somehow recruit potential foster families, as well as identify children who are vulnerable within our society who can be able to benefit from a foster care service. In Nakuru, we've been operating in Gilgil and Nakuru West in collaboration with an organization called IDC, where we've also done the same. When you're saying trying to recruit families, when you're saying identifying vulnerable children, this has been possible through collaboration with churches in the different areas, through collaboration with the chiefs, that is through the chief barazas, as well as in collaboration with different women groups that have shown a lot of interest in wanting to know more about foster care, and most importantly, giving an opportunity to a child for this child to be able to live within a family setup.
Okay.
Therefore, for the last 3 years, we've been able to place more than 70 children within family setups, and I really want to appreciate the families that came forth to offer this opportunity. And I believe if we expand this possibility to the entire Nairobi, to the entire country, then very many children will have an opportunity that currently they do not have. We believe strongly that this is living the gospel. This is living the true spirit of what is talked of in the Word of God.
Okay.
So in the last 3 years, this is what we've been doing, and it really gives a lot of satisfaction.
Okay. You know, Peter Boniface talked about vulnerable children. What qualifies a child to be considered a vulnerable child?
Thank you, James. Vulnerabilities for children range from different extremes. And for example, a child who has lost parental care, a child who is in a situation where he or she has lost their parent, either one or both parents, can actually be a vulnerable child. A child also who is experiencing violence at home or neglect. A child who has been neglected by their own parents as well as even relatives. A child who, for one reason or another, has been subjected to, the harmful cultural practices such as FGM.
Yes.
That's a vulnerable child. So vulnerabilities range from different scenarios. For example, a child who is not able to access food on a daily basis, or even an education, that child is considered vulnerable. And so different vulnerabilities call for different interventions.
Okay. Several people are asking this question, Boniface. How does one become a foster parent?
Becoming a foster parent is very easy. It first starts with you deciding as an individual, having also a discussion with your family members to be able to offer this kind of a possibility to a child that is vulnerable, as described by Peter. Once you arrive at this decision, it's important now to go to in the country we have counties, and then we also have sub-counties. Every sub-county in the country has a sub-county children officer. So when you go to this office, you will find an application form an application form that you can comfortably fill. The sub-county children officer will explain to you what the nitty-gritties about becoming a foster parent. When you are in agreement with what has been said, then an assessment will be done. When you're talking of an assessment, is the sub-county children officer or a caseworker coming to visit, for instance, your family, just to see what kind of an environment you are putting available for a child to be placed in. Then some sort of training is organized at an individual level or even in a group setup, whereby you'll be given different details on some of the dynamics that come around fostering a child. Okay. Considering that these children have a vulnerable background, it means some children will get into this arrangement who are having had some traumatic experiences. And therefore, it is important for parents to be sensitized on what it entails to take care of a child who has had a traumatic experience. It's also important to establish the motivation that is driving someone to become a foster parent, because we don't want to find ourselves in a situation whereby children are being placed with families or individuals that will take advantage of them. Because also that we have to recognize that risk is also there. Therefore, this is the main purpose of doing a thorough assessment to ensure that the child is safeguarded when he's placed or she's placed in this kind of an arrangement. Okay. Once the training and assessment is done, a matching process takes place. A matching process implies that you look at the needs of the child vis-a-vis the capacity and the capability of the family, so that the family is able to adequately respond to the needs of this child. Okay. When the child is placed within the family. So it's as simple as that. And a certificate is eventually issued by the sub-county children officer, so that you are doing this within the legal framework. Okay. This is how simple foster care works out. Thank you.
Nice. Peter, maybe you can take this one. This one says, hello, Pastor James. Ask the gentleman if foster care is free, and suppose I bond with the child and I want to stay with them for more than 3 years. What happens? And then also, how many kids can one foster at a go?
Thank you, James. Scripture tells us that God is a father to the fatherless. Yes. He's a defender of widows, and he sets the lonely in families. So first and foremost, foster care does not have any charges associated with it. But as Boniface alluded earlier, a willing heart and an open heart, a couple or a single person willing to open their heart and home to a child, that is the cost really. But also, for instance, it's a partnership at the same time. It's a situation, there are situations whereby a children's home would work in partnership with the family, that the family stays with the child, but the children's home caters for the child's education, because you realize before the child was taken from the children's home, they're already going to school. Yeah. So depending on the locality, there are families that are willing to get such kind of support, and others actually are willing to cater for the child's education. So there are no costs associated with this, but the usual cost that anyone who is caring for a child would expend or pay in caring for that particular child. Okay. You ask about the duration of 3 years. The Children Act currently is undergoing an overhaul, or we have the Children Bill 2021 in Parliament. And one of the things that they have recognized is this issue of cutting off foster care after 3 years. And so we are believing that early next year, sometime, the enactment of this law will be in place. And it means there will be opportunities for foster care to graduate into adoption if at all the child qualifies for such a process, and that attempts to get the child into permanence have not yielded any fruit. But also considering the short-term nature of foster care, as Boniface alluded, it means parents have to be prepared, as well as the child, that you are actually coming in as an interim carer for the child as permanence arrangements are made. But then in cases where that succeeds, good, you are already prepared from the beginning. That's why he's talking about it. In cases where that does not succeed, then there is opportunities to prolong the duration of care for that child, even up to age 18. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah. We talked about this earlier. Eunice is asking this. I love the conversation. My neighbor at home found a baby girl, uko kwa takataka. But kuna mama anafanana sana na huyu mtoto na anakujaga kutembea pale kumuona mtoto. So my neighbor wants to take the child to children's home. How can you help her on this? So what should somebody do when you find yourself in that situation? You found a child abandoned. Ametupwa huko kwa takataka. What should one do? Because the motherly instinct or the parental instinct is to take the child and care for them. But what should one do so that they don't find themselves in problems? Boniface, you want to take that?
Yes. When such a situation occurs, what is recommended that first you have to report this case to your nearest police station, so that an OB number is generated and the circumstances are well recorded.
Yeah.
The police officer that will be handling this case for sure will liaise with the sub-county children office to be able to notify the sub-county children office that we have, this now qualifies like an abandoned child. When we have abandoned children, for instance, we have rescue centers, not only run by government, as well as we also have rescue centers that are run by private entities in the country.
Yeah.
I believe it is in the purview that eventually this child will be taken to a rescue center, especially of government, so that some tracing or background check is done to be able to establish who is the parent of this child. Many times that these children eventually, if we are not able to trace their families, then this child eventually is freed up for adoption, as Peter had indicated earlier. But I believe what is important is not to take this child to this lady that appears to be so much similar to this child, but it is important that this child is taken to the nearest police station and due process is followed according to law.
Okay.
And Mr. Okumu, let me interject on this one. I think also to safeguard that particular child, it is important that this lady that is seeing a lady that looks like the child actually has a critical conversation with this mama. Okay, you come and visit frequently. Why so? But also try to formalize this process by approaching the children's office that is nearest to her, so that she's protected as the one caring for the child, but also that the safeguards necessary to protect this child are put in place.
Okay.
So it's important to have a critical conversation on exactly what her interest is and ensure that the formalizations are done with the children's office to safeguard both the child and the lady caring for the child.
Okay.
But as Okada has said, first point is report to the police, the children's department will be involved, and their due processes and procedure for placement of such children into appropriate care before long-term arrangements are made.
There's a question here on adoption, Peter. Maybe you can take this one. It says, I have a question regarding adoption. Please ask the guests whether a parent has the right to change the child's name and get a birth certificate with the same upon adoption.
Thank you. Good question. I know when we were talking about the process of adoption, it was not easy to sort of take the whole process from A to Z. But yes, once the court has granted the adoption orders and allowed that adoption, part of that application process is that the name of the child is changed from Peter Kamau to Felix Omondi, or whichever name this adoptive family actually desires for the child. And it is dependent also on the age of the child. For instance, if the child is under 2 years or 3 years, under 3, that is very easy. But in cases where you are adopting a child that is already way past 4 years and the child knows their name, my son knew his name by the time he was 3 years. So sometimes you are encouraged to actually keep at least the name the child is familiar with, and you can add the surname or the family name. Also, there was a judgment by Justice Lenaola a couple of years ago because adoptive families complained that children that are adopted are given an adoption certificate, and this is what they produce in school. But then to avoid that stigma associated with such, the judge actually allowed that birth certificates be processed for adopted children, having the name of James Okumu and spouse, as well as the new name of the child.
Okay. Okay. I am giving you one more opportunity to ask questions. It's about 7:45. 20316 is the SMS line. WhatsApp number 0786 316 316. We are talking about adoption and foster care in Kenya. Gentlemen, there's a question here from Lillian. Lillian says, thank you very much for this good session on foster care. Kindly, gentlemen, help me out on this. I have a sister married with a child to another man who is not the father to this child. This man wants full ownership of the child. How can he be assisted? Peter, you can take that one.
Great. That's a good question, Lillian. Mr. Okumu, what happens is for children that are in such settings, it's actually possible that the new dad can actually process an adoption application. But what is most important is that the child's biological father needs to consent to this process. The Children Act provides that such a child can be placed into an adoptive arrangement where the dad is now the new gentleman that the child recognizes as dad. But then the father's consent, especially if he's been a part of the child's life, would be required. And there are men actually who say, I am happy for that to happen. Others say, I'm unfortunately not very supportive of that. So it all is dependent. In cases where children have been born in such a setting, but then the father has been an absent dad, then the law actually has got a provision that stipulates that if at all he's not been a part of the child's life for 6 months, that he loses his rights automatically. So there is a bit of proving what has the role of this man been in the child's life. But yes, it's possible to actually have relative adoptions.
Okay. Boniface, people are saying there's a question we haven't answered. How many children can one foster?
Okay, according to the number of children to be fostered, currently it's allowed that you can foster up to a maximum of 6 children.
Ooh.
And when you're talking about 6 children, this must be inclusive of your own children. Which implies, for instance, if you have 2 children, you can be able to foster up to a maximum of 4 children.
Na kama sisi wengine tumebarikiwa tuko na watoto 8, we are locked out.
Unfortunately, that's what the law stipulates.
Okay.
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay. All right, let me see if there are any other questions and on adoption. Okay, there are just good comments here. People saying they are learning a lot. Thank you for bringing this to gentlemen. We are learning a lot about adoption and all that. My time is almost up. So I was wondering, Peter, the children who don't get adopted, they don't get into foster care, what happens to them?
Thank you, James. We have many children that unfortunately do not get adopted for one reason or another. I, for instance, grew up in a children's home my entire childhood.
Oh, and, really?
I longed, yes, I longed for the day that I would be taken away to be part of a family, because I would see my peers actually bond with families and go away. But a lot of times you find that children's homes would also be keeping children that have relatives that are known. And so you find that for such children, yes, I'm an orphan. My siblings equally were in the same children's home, but because we had relatives that are known, it was very difficult to get us placed into adoptive or foster parents arrangements because our relatives had to be consenting to such arrangements. And so we have the situations of the like, but also children's homes are doing the best they can. Some with very good intentions, unfortunately others with not good intentions. But we have a situation whereby when children continue to grow up in these kind of settings, children's homes for prolonged durations of time, evidence and research has shown that 1 in 3 become homeless.
Wow.
1 in 5 end up having a criminal record. And 1 in 7 girls end up involved in prostitution. And 1 in 10 commits suicide.
That's sad.
And you know what? The person talking to you right now, his eldest brother, Peter, myself, my eldest brother, Patrick, committed suicide not long after leaving the children's home. So it tells you these are unfortunate realities. And that is why the church needs to seriously consider defending the weak and the fatherless, as scripture commands us in Psalm 82. Uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed and deliver them from the hand of the wicked. The wicked, in this case, we are talking about places where they are vulnerable to harm, as well as vulnerable to exploitation, to trafficking, etc. And it's a clarion call that the church would actually take in these children, because the unfortunate thing is that the outcomes are not very good. But yes, some of us are exceptions by God's grace. We continue on, and that's why we are in the kind of work that we are doing today. But yes, children are growing up in children's homes, some even over 18. Others, unfortunately, are surrendered or delinked from the children's homes pretty early on, and hence the outcomes are really unfortunate. So the earlier we get them out of these places, the better.
Wow. Boniface, just to jump onto what Peter said, what do you think the church should do? What are some practical things the church can do, to help with this situation?
I think the church is central. The church is strategic in when we want to offer a service to children, because families are the constituent members of church. And here we are talking about, we want to give an opportunity for a child who at the moment is not living within a family setup to be able to live within a family. Therefore, the church can easily help in not only inviting Christians, but also journeying together with these Christians in ensuring that these Christians are able to take care of not only their relatives, that is under kinship care, but also going an extra mile to consider options like foster care, whereby you are offering family opportunity to a child who is not related to you in any way, but you are just doing it not only following the scriptures, but also because of your good heart. 3, we are also inviting the church to invite families to be able to be available for adoption possibilities. Therefore, I believe the church is central to this call. The government can do as much as it can in terms of putting systems that are protective to children. But the framework that has families is the church.
Okay. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Unfortunately, our time is up for today, but I must say thank you for a very fruitful conversation. Looking at the comments that are coming in, audience has really been enlightened, and their questions have been answered. So, asanteni sana.
Thank you, James.
Awesome. My time is up for today. Thank you for being a part of Parenting Tuesday. God willing, next week we get into another topic on parenting. Have yourselves a great day.
Thank you for watching. Remember, subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can get notified whenever we upload new fresh content every day. Stay tuned and enjoy fresh, uplifting content.